The stasis chamber hummed with a dull vibration that penetrated Nyx's bones. Teal illumination panels cast ghostly shadows across the polished obsidian walls, each surface reflecting her diminutive form like a house of mirrors. She huddled in the far corner, her luminous silver skin pulsing with fear-induced bioluminescence, betraying her emotional state despite her best efforts to remain calm. Nyx belonged to the Lumen race, beings of light and energy rather than flesh and blood. Her delicate frame barely reached the height of a Terran child, but her eyes, deep pools of swirling azure, held the wisdom of centuries. Those eyes now darted anxiously around the chamber, searching for any means of escape. "The Terrans will dissect you," her elder had warned during her final transmission. "They'll extract your essence to power their war machines. Never trust a Terran's smile. It hides the predator beneath." The memories haunted her as she curled tighter, her four-fingered hands, each digit ending in a small bioluminescent node, clasped around her knees. Her drift capsule had malfunctioned after the quantum storm, sending her spiraling into uncharted space. The Terran patrol vessel had intercepted her distress beacon. She'd been unconscious when they brought her aboard. Now she was their prisoner. A soft hiss announced the chamber's entrance sliding open. Nyx's light dimmed instinctively, an evolutionary response to danger. A tall figure blocked the doorway, silhouetted against the harsh corridor lights. Terran, definitely. 2 arms, 2 legs, a head of copper-colored hair, and eyes the color of fertile soil. A jagged scar ran from his right temple to his jaw, cutting through a close-cropped beard. His uniform, a deep indigo jumpsuit with silver insignia, bore signs of wear at the elbows and knees. "You're conscious," he said, his voice lower than she expected, with a rough quality that suggested disuse. The translator implanted in her auditory canal converted his words to meaning, though the nuances of Terran speech patterns remained elusive. Nyx pressed herself against the wall, her light pulsing rapidly with fear. "Please," she whispered in her native tongue, a series of light pulses in melodic tones. "Don't extract my essence." The Terran's brow furrowed. He crouched down, maintaining his distance from the stasis field that separated them. With deliberate movements, he placed a container on the floor and slid it toward the field. The container passed through the one-way barrier and stopped just within her reach. "Sustenance," he said, indicating the container with a nod. "And hydration. Your physiology scan showed compatibility." Nyx stared at the offering without moving. The container held what appeared to be a gelatinous cube in a flask of luminescent liquid. Despite the gnawing emptiness inside her, Lumen required energy absorption every 12 cycles, she remained motionless. This was surely a trap designed to test her capabilities or weaken her defenses. The Terran sighed, a sound that contained more weariness than impatience. "I'm Commander Riven. You're on the Terran vessel Horizon. Your drift capsule was damaged beyond repair." He paused, studying her with an intensity that made her light flicker. "You're safe here." Safe. The word meant nothing coming from a Terran. The stories were too numerous, too consistent. Terrans had decimated 3 sentient species in the SETI quadrant alone. They viewed non-Terrans as resources to be utilized, not beings to be respected. When she made no move toward the food, Riven nodded as if he'd expected this response. Without another word, he stood and departed, the door sealing behind him with the same soft hiss. Nyx remained motionless for what felt like an eternity, her gaze fixed on the container. Eventually, hunger overpowered caution. She inched forward, her movements hesitant, and examined the offerings. The gelatinous cube emitted a faint energy signature that her body recognized as compatible sustenance. The liquid sparkled with trace minerals her system required. Still, she refused to consume them. Not yet. Not until she understood the Terran's motives. When Riven returned, he carried a different device, slender, with a pulsing emerald core. Nyx recoiled instantly, her light going almost completely dark. The device resembled the extraction tools from her elder's warnings. Riven stopped, noting her reaction. "It's a medi-sealer," he explained, his voice carefully neutral. He turned the device toward his own arm, where a small laceration marked his skin. The device hummed softly as he passed it over the wound. Before her eyes, the torn flesh knitted itself together, leaving only a faint pink line. He gestured toward her side and Nyx glanced down. A jagged wound crossed her midsection, a remnant from the capsule crash that she'd barely registered in her fear. Her silver skin had darkened to ash gray around the injury, indicating cellular distress. Riven approached the stasis field barrier slowly, holding the medisealer where she could clearly see it. His intentions were obvious. He wanted to treat her wound. Nyx retreated farther into the corner, shaking her head emphatically. Her light pulsed a warning pattern, universal among most sentient species. Stay away. To her surprise, Riven respected her boundary. He placed the medisealer on the floor, just as he had done with the food, and pushed it through the barrier. Your choice, he said simply, then left her alone once more. The pattern repeated over 3 cycles. Riven would bring sustenance, check her condition from a distance, and leave medical tools within her reach, but never force them upon her. He spoke little and never threatened. His behavior contradicted everything she'd been taught about Terrans. On the 4th cycle, as Nyx finally began to cautiously use the medisealer on her wound, the ship lurched violently. She was thrown against the barrier, which sparked and momentarily flickered. Emergency illumination bathed the chamber in crimson light. A deep, reverberating tone echoed throughout the vessel, a sound that sent tremors through her body. The door burst open, and Riven appeared, his expression taut. Blood streaked one side of his face from a fresh cut above his eye. With a swift motion, he deactivated the stasis field. Nyx cowered, certain that whatever threat had befallen the ship had accelerated their timeline for her. Now they would take her, use her, drain her. But Riven didn't grab her. Instead, he positioned himself between her and the doorway, a compact pulse rifle raised and ready. His body formed a living shield between Nyx and whatever approached. Stay behind me, he said, his voice tight with concentration. A sound like shearing metal filled the corridor outside, a terrible grinding noise that no machine should make. Something was cutting through the ship's hull. Then came a wet, organic sound, like massive lungs expanding and contracting. Voidborn, Riven whispered, the word itself carrying a weight of dread. Nyx froze. The Voidborn were no myth or cautionary tale. They were real, and they were here. Ancient entities that existed in the space between stars, feeding on sentient life and the technologies they created. They consumed entire civilizations, leaving only empty worlds in their wake. In her people's history, they were known as the Devourers, harbingers of extinction. She peered around Riven's protective stance as a shadow filled the doorway. The creature that entered bore only a superficial resemblance to humanoid form. Its body was encased in articulated armor, the color of a dying star, deep purple edged with cosmic black. 6 asymmetrical limbs moved with unnatural precision. Its face, if it could be called such, was a smooth, reflective oval interrupted only by 3 vertical slits that pulsed with internal crimson light. On its chest plate, a symbol glowed, a spiral descending into a single point, the mark of the void. Riven fired without hesitation. The pulse rifle discharged a stream of concentrated energy that struck the Voidborn directly in its center mass. The creature staggered but didn't fall. Instead, it emitted a sound like reality itself being torn, a dimensional scream that forced Nyx to cover her auditory receptors. The Voidborn lunged forward, its movements blindingly fast. One limb connected with Riven's shoulder, sending him crashing into the wall. The pulse rifle skittered across the floor. Nyx watched in horror as the Terran commander, despite the obvious pain, pushed himself back to his feet and drew a vibroblade from his belt. The weapon hummed to life, its edge glowing with destabilizing energy designed to disrupt molecular bonds. "Run!" Riven shouted, stepping forward to meet the Voidborn's next attack. Nyx didn't run. She couldn't. Her body refused to abandon the Terran who had positioned himself as her protector. This wasn't the behavior of a monster or a predator. This was something else entirely. The Voidborn and Riven clashed in a blur of movement. The vibroblade connected with the creature's armor, sending sparks cascading to the floor. The Voidborn's limbs lashed out, opening cuts across Riven's arms and torso. Still, he fought, placing himself between the creature and Nyx with unwavering determination. In that moment, watching the Terran bleed for her, a stranger, an alien, Nyx understood a truth that shattered her preconceptions. The true monster wasn't the human fighting to protect her. It was the ancient horror that had pursued her across the stars. As Riven faltered, a particularly vicious strike sending him to one knee, Nyx made a decision. She darted forward, snatched up the fallen Medisealer, and pressed it against the Voidborn's exposed joint where two plates of armor met. The device wasn't designed as a weapon, but at its core, it manipulated cellular structures. What healed could also harm if applied differently. She adjusted the frequency with instinctive understanding and activated it at full power. The Voidborn convulsed as the device disrupted the connection between its armor and the organic matter beneath. One of its limbs went limp, the armor plate falling away to reveal pulsating, otherworldly tissue beneath. Riven seized the opportunity. With a final surge of strength, he drove the vibroblade into the exposed area. The Voidborn emitted another dimensional scream, this one fragmented and weakening. It collapsed, its remaining limbs twitching in diminishing spasms before it went still. In the sudden silence, Nyx stared at the fallen creature, then at the wounded Terran who had defended her. Riven's breathing was labored, his uniform soaked with blood. "Why?" she asked, the single word encompassing volumes of confusion and revelation. Riven met her gaze, his eyes clear despite his injuries. "Because you're a person," he answered simply, "and they're the real monsters." Before she could respond, the ship's emergency system activated. A synthetic voice echoed through the chamber. "Multiple hull breaches detected. Voidborn boarding parties in sectors 3, 5, and 7. Life support compromised. Automated distress beacon activated." Riven grimaced as he struggled to his feet. "We need to reach the escape vessels," he said, retrieving his pulse rifle. "This ship is lost." "They came for me," Nyx realized aloud, her light pulsing with the revelation. "Not you. Me. Why would they—" Riven began, but was interrupted by another violent shudder that ran through the ship. "No time," he said, extending his hand to her. "Trust me or don't, but we need to move. Now." Nyx looked at the offered hand. 5 fingers instead of her 4, skin instead of luminescence. Yet in that moment, the differences seemed insignificant compared to what they shared. The will to survive against the Voidborn. She placed her hand in his. "Together," she said. The corridor outside was a chaos of emergency lighting and acrid smoke. Distant sounds of battle echoed through the ship. Pulse weapons discharging, metal tearing, and the dimensional screams of the Voidborn. Riven led them through a maintenance passage, bypassing the main corridors where the fighting was heaviest. "The auxiliary shuttle bay is 2 levels down," he explained as they moved. "It's our best chance." "Your crew?" Nyx asked. Riven's expression darkened. "Defending the ship, creating a diversion." The unspoken reality hung between them. Most would not survive. They reached an emergency shaft, a narrow tube designed for rapid transit between decks in crisis situations. Riven winced as he primed the mechanism, his injuries clearly causing significant pain. Nyx noticed a medical patch affixed to his side, already saturated with blood. "You're severely damaged," she observed. "Just need to hold together a little longer," he replied with grim determination. The shaft activated, generating a controlled gravity well that would guide them down to the lower levels. Riven secured an arm around Nyx's waist, a necessary protective gesture given her small size, and they stepped into the shaft together. The descent was swift and disorienting. Nyx's natural bioluminescence flared in response to the rapid change in pressure and velocity. When they emerged on the lower level, alarms were blaring at an even higher intensity. "We're running out of time," Riven said, consulting a holographic display on his wrist. "The ship's quantum core is destabilizing. When it goes—" He didn't need to finish. The explosion would vaporize everything within a considerable radius. They reached a sealed doorway marked with Terran symbols designating the auxiliary shuttle bay. Riven placed his palm against the security scanner, but nothing happened. "Power's out in this section," he muttered. "Manual override." He moved to a panel beside the door and yanked it open, revealing a complex array of circuitry. With practiced movements, he rearranged several components and connected a bypass sequence. The door reluctantly slid open halfway before jamming. "Good enough," he said, gesturing for Nyx to slip through the narrow opening. The shuttle bay beyond was dimly lit by emergency power alone. A single vessel remained, a sleek, short-range shuttle designed for planetary landings. Most of the bay's contents had been jettisoned or claimed by earlier evacuees. As they moved toward the shuttle, a new sound reached them, a rhythmic, deliberate thumping from above. Not the chaotic noise of battle, but the measured approach of something massive. Riven's expression hardened. "They've sent a sovereign." "A what?" Nyx asked, though part of her already knew, instinctively, that this was something to fear. "Voidborn Command Unit," Riven explained tersely, urging her toward the shuttle. "They only deploy them for high-value targets." The ceiling above them began to glow with an unnatural heat. Something was cutting through from the deck above. Something with enough power to melt the reinforced alloys of a Terran warship as if they were vapor. "Get to the shuttle," Riven ordered, positioning himself beneath the glowing section of ceiling. "Start the launch sequence. Command authorization, Riven 7 Echo 9. "You're coming too," Nyx insisted, her light pulsing with newfound resolve. Riven met her gaze, and for a brief moment, something like admiration flickered in his eyes. "I'll be right behind you. Someone needs to slow it down." Before she could protest further, a massive section of the ceiling collapsed. Through the molten opening descended a voidborn unlike any Nyx had seen before. Nearly 3 times the size of the one they'd encountered earlier, its armor was ornate with flowing patterns that seemed to capture and reflect light in impossible ways. Its limbs, 8 rather than 6, ended in articulated appendages capable of both devastating force and intricate manipulation. Its face was the most unnerving difference. Rather than the smooth oval of the standard Voidborn, the Sovereign's visage featured a complex arrangement of interlocking plates that continuously reconfigured themselves, as if trying to form an expression comprehensible to lesser beings. "Go!" Riven shouted, opening fire with his pulse rifle. The energy bolt struck the Sovereign's armor and dissipated harmlessly. The creature regarded Riven with what might have been curiosity. When it spoke, the sound bypassed conventional hearing, resonating directly within their minds. "The luminous one is ours by right of ancient claim." The words carried weight beyond their meaning, each syllable accompanied by visions of star death and cosmic horror. Riven stood his ground. "She doesn't belong to anyone." The Sovereign's faceplates shifted into what might have been amusement. "Your kind always believes it can resist the inevitable." Nyx hesitated at the shuttle's entrance, unwilling to abandon Riven. The Terran commander glanced back, saw her still there, and his expression shifted to one of urgency. "Nyx! The shuttle! Now!" The Sovereign moved with shocking speed for its size. One massive limb swept Riven aside, sending him crashing into a stack of supply containers. The creature then turned its attention to Nyx, its faceplates reconfiguring into an approximation of hunger. "The pattern must be completed," it intoned. "You are the final sequence." Nyx backed away, her light pulsing erratically with fear. She had no weapons, no defenses against such a being. All she had was... A thought struck her. The Medi-Sealer. She still clutched it in her hand. As the Sovereign approached, she adjusted the device's settings once more, pushing them beyond safe parameters. The emerald core began to glow brighter, vibrating with dangerous intensity. "Stay back," she warned, the translator rendering her light language into audible sound. "Your resistance is irrelevant," the Sovereign responded, still advancing. From the wreckage of containers, Riven emerged, bloodied but determined. With a desperate lunge, he drove his vibroblade into the back of the Sovereign's knee joint, one of the few areas where the armor plates overlapped, creating a potential weakness. The Sovereign roared, a sound that threatened to tear reality apart at its seams. It turned to deal with Riven, momentarily forgetting Nyx. That was all the opportunity she needed. Nyx darted forward, her small size allowing her to slip between the Sovereign's massive limbs. With all her strength, she pressed the overloaded Medi-Sealer against the creature's chest plate, directly over the spiral symbol. "This is relevant," she said, and activated the device. The Medi-Sealer exploded in a burst of bioelectric energy. The blast threw Nyx backward, her light momentarily dimming as her systems absorbed the shock. The Sovereign's chest plate cracked, revealing a pulsating core beneath. Not organic, not mechanical, but something in between. Something ancient and wrong. Riven didn't waste the opportunity. With a final, desperate effort, he plunged the vibroblade into the exposed core. The Sovereign convulsed, its limbs flailing in a frenzy that threatened to bring down the entire shuttle bay. Its mental voice became a cacophony of rage and disbelief. Impossible! The sequence cannot be broken. Riven staggered to Nyx's side and helped her to her feet. The shuttle, he urged. We have seconds, not minutes. Together they rushed into the small vessel as the Sovereign continued its death throes behind them. The shuttle's systems responded to Riven's authorization, powering up with reassuring efficiency. As the bay doors began to open, exposing the star-filled void beyond, the Sovereign managed one final, chilling proclamation. The pattern persists. Other sovereigns will come. The Luminous One cannot escape her destiny. The shuttle launched, accelerating away from the doomed Terran vessel, just as the quantum core reached critical destabilization. The resulting explosion illuminated space for light years around, a brief, brilliant star in the cosmic darkness. Nyx stared at the view screen, watching the destruction recede. What did it mean? What pattern? What destiny? Riven, slumped in the pilot's seat, his injuries finally taking their toll, shook his head. I don't know, but whatever the Voidborn want, it can't be good for anyone else. You could have left me, Nyx said quietly. You could have saved yourself without risking everything for an alien? Riven finished, a weak smile forming beneath the blood and grime on his face. Maybe once. Not anymore. What changed? Riven's gaze turned distant. I saw what the Voidborn did to my homeworld. I watched them systematize extinction. After that, he paused, searching for words. After that, the differences between your people and mine seemed insignificant compared to the difference between us and them. The shuttle's navigation system beeped, requesting a destination. Riven glanced at the display, his expression thoughtful. There's a planet in this system, he said, officially uninhabited, but there are rumors of settlements, refugees from Voidborn expansion, not Terran, not Lumen, but others who've lost their homes. You think they'll help us? Nyx asked. I think, Riven said, programming the coordinates, that anyone who's running from the Voidborn has reason to help others doing the same. As the shuttle adjusted course, heading toward the mysterious planet, Riven finally succumbed to his injuries, slipping into unconsciousness. Nyx moved to his side, examining his wounds with newfound concern. Using the shuttle's medical supplies, she began treating him as best she could, guided by instinct and the faint memories of healing techniques observed in her youth. Her luminescence took on a soft, steady rhythm, not the erratic pulses of fear, but the measured cadence of focused determination. The true monsters were behind them, at least for now, but the Sovereign's final words echoed in her mind, a promise and a threat woven into one. Whatever destiny the Voidborn had planned for her, whatever pattern they sought to complete, Nyx made a silent vow as she tended to the injured Terran. She would not face it alone. The descent through the planet's atmosphere was more violent than the shuttle systems had predicted. Swirling clouds of iridescent gases buffeted the small vessel, sending it tumbling through layers of increasing density. Warning indicators flashed across the control panel as external sensors registered temperatures far beyond expected parameters. In the pilot's seat, Riven fought to maintain consciousness, his hands moving across the controls with practiced efficiency despite his injuries. Nyx watched, her luminescence dimmed to conserve energy, as he navigated the treacherous conditions with grim determination. The gravitational readings are inconsistent, he muttered, more to himself than to her. Something's interfering with our sensors. A particularly fierce turbulence shook the shuttle, loosening a ceiling panel that crashed to the floor between them. Nyx instinctively reached out, her four-fingered hand grasping Riven's arm in a gesture of shared anxiety. Can we return to orbit? She asked, the translator rendering her light pulses into the Terran standard language. Riven shook his head. Fuel cells were damaged in the escape. It's this planet or nothing. The view screen showed only swirling chaos, occasional breaks in the atmospheric turmoil revealing glimpses of a landscape below. Vast forests of twisted vegetation in impossible shades of blue and violet, punctuated by crystalline formations that reflected the light of this system's distant sun. With a final, wrenching jolt, the shuttle broke through the lower atmosphere. The turbulence ceased abruptly, as if they'd passed through a barrier. Below them stretched a panorama of alien beauty, the forests they had glimpsed now revealed in their full splendor, extending to a distant coastline where an ocean of liquid that glowed with internal bioluminescence lapped against shores of obsidian sand. There, Riven said, indicating a relatively clear area near the forest's edge. Best chance for a controlled landing. Controlled proved optimistic. The shuttle's remaining engine gave out mere meters above the ground, sending them into a skidding impact that carved a deep furrow through the alien soil. Internal systems wailed in protest as the vessel finally came to rest at the base of a massive crystal formation that towered above the surrounding forest. For several moments, neither of them moved, the shock of survival washing over them in waves. Finally, Riven released his restraints and struggled to his feet, one hand pressed against his worst injury. "We need to," he began, but the sentence was cut short as his legs gave way beneath him. Nyx darted forward, catching him despite her small size, her lumen strength surprising for her stature. "Rest," she said firmly, guiding him to a bench along the shuttle's wall. "I'll check our surroundings." Riven looked as though he wanted to protest, but the pain overwhelmed his objections. He nodded once, his jaw tight with suppressed agony. Nyx approached the shuttle's exit hatch, peering through the small viewport. The landscape outside remained still and serene, showing no immediate signs of danger. She activated the environmental scanner, one of the few systems still functioning, and studied the readout. "Atmosphere is compatible with both our physiologies," she reported. "Toxicity levels minimal, temperature within tolerable range." She paused, noting an unusual reading. "There's an energy signature permeating everything, the air, the soil, the vegetation. Something I've never encountered before." "Dangerous?" Riven asked, his voice strained. Nyx studied the readings more carefully. "Not immediately. It's almost familiar somehow. Like it's resonating with my own energy patterns, but at a frequency I don't recognize." She decided to risk opening the hatch. The mechanism protested, but eventually complied, sliding aside to admit a rush of alien air. The scent was complex, notes of ozone and something like spiced honey, underlaid with mineral tones that tickled her sensory receptors. Cautiously, Nyx stepped outside, her bare feet making contact with the planet's soil for the first time. A tingling sensation spread up through her limbs as the mysterious energy field interacted with her bioluminescent physiology. It wasn't unpleasant. Rather, it felt invigorating, as if she were drawing sustenance directly from the environment itself. The crystal formation beside the shuttle rose at least 50 meters into the sky, its surface faceted like an expertly cut gem, but on a monumental scale. Within its translucent depths, patterns of light shifted and swirled, responding to some unseen stimulus. Nyx approached it, drawn by an inexplicable sense of recognition. When she placed her palm against its surface, the crystal resonated with a tone that vibrated through her entire being. The patterns within intensified, coalescing into shapes that almost resembled writing. Not in any language she knew, yet somehow comprehensible at a level beyond conscious thought. "Convergence," she whispered, the concept forming in her mind without clear origin. "This place is a convergence point." A rustling from the nearby forest snapped her attention away from the crystal. Something was moving among the twisted blue vegetation. Multiple somethings, judging by the distributed disturbances. Nyx retreated toward the shuttle, her light pulsing a warning pattern. "Riven," she called softly through the open hatch. "We're not alone." The Terran commander appeared at the doorway, leaning heavily against the frame. He had managed to apply fresh medical patches to his worst injuries and now held his pulse rifle at the ready, though the weapon's charge indicator showed dangerously low levels. From the forest emerged a group of beings unlike any Nyx had encountered. They walked upright on 2 or 4 limbs, depending on the individual, their bodies covered in what appeared to be a living armor of interlocking plates, similar to tree bark. Their heads featured no obvious sensory organs, yet they moved with purpose and awareness, clearly perceiving their surroundings through means she couldn't identify. One of them stepped forward, larger than the others, its bark-like covering adorned with intricate patterns that might have been status indicators or ceremonial markings. It carried a staff topped with a smaller version of the crystal formation that towered above them. When it spoke, The sound bypassed conventional hearing, much like the Voidborn Sovereign's communication, but without the accompanying horror. Instead, the words formed directly in Nyx's mind, accompanied by sensations of curiosity and cautious welcome. "You carry the resonance, small one." Nyx glanced at Riven, who nodded slightly, indicating he had heard it too. She stepped forward, her light pulsing in a peaceful pattern. "We come seeking refuge," she responded, uncertain if her light language would be understood. "Our vessel was damaged escaping the Voidborn." A ripple of reaction passed through the gathered beings at the mention of the Voidborn, a collective tensing that transcended species differences. "The Devourers pursue you," the leader stated, not a question, but a grim acknowledgement. "Yes," Nyx confirmed. "A sovereign claimed I was part of some pattern, some sequence they seek to complete." The leader's posture changed subtly, a shifting of its bark plates that somehow conveyed great concern. It turned toward Riven, studying the wounded Terran with what felt like surprise. "And this one? A Terran stands with you rather than with the Devourers." "He saved my life," Nyx said simply. "Multiple times. He fought the Sovereign to ensure my escape." The leader approached Riven, who maintained his dignified stance despite obvious pain. The being raised its staff, the crystal at its tip glowing with increasing intensity as it neared the Terran. "Your wounds are severe, Terran. Why risk death for one not of your kind?" Riven met the featureless face without flinching. "Because the Voidborn are the enemy of all life, not just my own, and because it was the right thing to do." The leader was silent for a long moment, the crystal on its staff pulsing in sync with some internal deliberation. Finally, it turned back to address both of them. "I am Vorus, elder of the Sylvanix. We too fled the Devourers when they consumed our homeworld. This place," it gestured to the surrounding landscape, "is sanctuary, one of the last." Vorus then pointed to the massive crystal formation beside the shuttle. "The Nexus crystal recognized you, luminous one. It resonates with your essence in a way we have not witnessed before. This requires contemplation." The elder turned and made a gesture to the other Sylvanix. Two of them approached Riven with what appeared to be medical supplies of some kind, containers of luminescent paste and wrapped bundles of fibrous material. "Your Terran will be tended. His actions against the Devourers earn him that right." "Thank you," Nyx said, her luminescence brightening with relief. "Do not express gratitude yet," Vorus cautioned. "Your arrival may bring the Devourers to our sanctuary. The Council must determine if the risk of your presence outweighs the potential of your resonance." With that cryptic statement, the Sylvanix began their work. The two assigned to Riven applied their medicinal paste to his wounds with surprising gentleness for beings with such seemingly rigid exteriors. The substance hissed softly as it made contact with his injuries, drawing a sharp intake of breath from the Terran. But the pain in his expression soon gave way to relief. "It's cooling the burn," he explained to Nyx. "Some kind of analgesic effect." While Riven was being treated, Vorus led Nyx to the base of the Nexus crystal. Up close, the patterns within its translucent depths were even more mesmerizing, flowing, changing, responding to her proximity in ways that seemed almost sentient. "The crystal remembers," Vorus explained. "It holds the knowledge of all who have sought sanctuary here, dating back to the first convergence." "First convergence?" Nyx questioned. "When the Ancient Ones created this place as a nexus of resistance against the Devourers. Before my kind, before your kind, perhaps even before the Terrans." Vorus placed the tip of its staff against the larger crystal, creating a resonance that sent shivers through the ground beneath them. In response, the patterns within the Nexus crystal shifted dramatically, coalescing into a three-dimensional display that hovered before them like a holographic projection. The image showed a spiral galaxy, recognizably the one they inhabited, with certain points illuminated along its sweeping arms. Each point pulsed with the same energy signature that permeated this planet. "Convergence points," Vorus explained, "places where the barriers between dimensions thin, where energies converge and amplify. The Ancient Ones created these as anchors against the void." One by one, the illuminated points winked out until only a handful remained. "The Devourers have found and destroyed most of them in their endless hunger. This, the elder indicated the planet around them, is one of the last untouched sanctuaries. The projection shifted again, showing a sequence of symbols that bore unsettling resemblance to the spiral mark Nyx had seen on the Voidborn Sovereign's chest plate. The pattern they seek to complete is this, the final sequence that will allow them to locate and destroy all remaining convergence points simultaneously. Voris turned to Nyx, its featureless face somehow conveying intense scrutiny. And you, Luminous One, carry within your essence a key to that sequence. That is why they hunt you with such determination. Nyx's light dimmed with shock and dismay. I don't understand. How could I possibly? Your kind, the Lumen, were not born of natural evolution, Voris interrupted. You were created by the Ancient Ones as living keys, guardians of the convergence knowledge. The revelation struck Nyx like a physical blow. Everything she had believed about her people's origins, the stories of their emergence from the stellar nurseries of the Carina Nebula, their gradual evolution from pure energy to semi-corporeal form, all of it called into question by this strange being's words. That's not possible, she whispered, her light flickering with distress. My elders would have known. They would have told us. Perhaps they did not know, Voris suggested. Or perhaps they chose to forget, as many have when the burden of knowledge became too great. The elder Sylvanix touched the crystal again, changing the projection to show beings of light that resembled Nyx's people, but with subtle differences, more complex patterns of luminescence, additional appendages, a radiance that suggested greater power. The original lumen were created to interface with the Nexus crystals to maintain the convergence network that kept the Devourers at bay. Over millennia, as the Ancient Ones faded from memory, the lumen evolved, losing much of their original purpose and power. Nyx stared at the images, trying to reconcile this new information with everything she had believed about herself and her people. If what you say is true, then why am I different? Why do the Voidborn, the Devourers, seek me specifically? Voris's bark plates shifted in what might have been a gesture of uncertainty. That we cannot yet know. The council must convene. The Nexus crystal must be fully consulted. From across the clearing, Riven called out, his voice stronger than before, thanks to the Sylvanix treatment. Nyx, are you all right? She turned to reassure him, only to find that the Terran was now standing with minimal assistance, his wounds visibly improved. The medicinal paste had hardened into a flexible second skin over his injuries, facilitating rapid healing. I'm fine, she responded, though her light patterns would have told a different story to anyone who could read them. The elder has been explaining things. Riven made his way to her side, nodding respectfully to Voris. What kind of things? Before Nyx could answer, a low, resonating tone filled the air. Not sound in the conventional sense, but a vibration that they felt in their very cells. The Sylvanix immediately turned toward the forest, their postures alert and wary. The Sentinels have detected something, Voris explained. Something approaching from orbit. Riven's expression hardened. The Voidborn? Already? Unlikely, the elder responded. The Devourer's signature is unmistakable. This is different. The Sylvanix conferred among themselves in their silent, mind-to-mind communication. After a brief exchange, Voris turned back to them. We must seek the protection of the settlement. Come. Without waiting for a response, the elder led the way into the blue-violet forest, the other Sylvanix forming a protective formation around Nyx and Riven. As they moved deeper among the twisted vegetation, Nyx noticed that the plants seemed to respond to their passage, bending away to clear a path, then closing behind them to obscure their trail. The forest is alive, she whispered to Riven, who nodded grimly. More than just alive, he responded. It's intelligent, coordinated. I've seen similar phenomena on only 2 other worlds, both ancient convergence points according to old Terran records, both now lifeless after Voidborn incursion. The revelation that Riven possessed knowledge of convergence points surprised Nyx. You know of these places? The Terran's expression grew distant. Certain factions among my people have studied them for generations. Most dismiss the findings as myth or misinterpreted data, but some of us know better. Before Nyx could press further, they emerged into a wide clearing dominated by structures unlike anything she had seen before. Buildings, if they could be called such, grew directly from the living forest. Their walls formed of interwoven vegetation, reinforced with the same crystalline material as the Nexus crystal. The structures pulsed with internal light that shifted in complex patterns, suggesting a communication network throughout the settlement. Sylvanics of varying sizes moved purposefully among the structures, along with beings of other species, some vaguely humanoid, others utterly alien in form. All coexisted in what appeared to be a harmonious community, united despite their biological differences. The sanctuary settlement, Vorus announced, home to refugees from 17 worlds consumed by the Devourers. As they entered the settlement proper, the various inhabitants paused in their activities to observe the newcomers. Nyx felt their attention focused particularly on her luminescent form drawing curious and sometimes reverent gazes. Vorus led them to a central structure larger than the others, its crystalline components arranged in an intricate latticework that captured and refracted light in hypnotic patterns. Inside, a circular chamber opened up, its walls embedded with smaller Nexus crystals that hummed with energy. Seated in a semicircle were 9 beings of different species, each positioned before one of the wall crystals. This clearly was the council that Vorus had mentioned. From the center position rose a being that defied easy description, its form constantly shifting between states of matter, from solid to liquid to gaseous and back again, maintaining only a general humanoid shape throughout the transformations. When it spoke, its voice resonated directly in their minds, like Vorus's communication, but with even greater clarity and presence. I am Elos, Elder Prime of the Sanctuary. Vorus has shared your arrival and the resonance you carry, Luminous One. Nyx stepped forward, her light pulsing respectfully. I seek understanding as much as Sanctuary, Elder Prime. I had no knowledge of convergence points or my supposed connection to them until today. Elos's form rippled in what might have been acknowledgement. Few remember the truth of the ancient days. The Devourers have been thorough in their elimination of such knowledge. The Elder Prime's attention shifted to Riven. A Terran who stands against the Devourers is rare. Most of your kind have chosen appeasement or denial in the face of the Void's advance. Riven straightened despite his injuries. Some of us remember what happens to those who appease predators, Elder Prime. I've witnessed the results of such policies firsthand. Indeed, Elos gestured to one of the wall crystals, which illuminated in response. This council must determine what your arrival means for the sanctuary. The Luminous One's resonance with the Nexus crystal suggests significance beyond mere coincidence, yet the risk she brings is equally considerable. Another council member, a being with an exoskeleton that seemed to be composed of living metal, leaned forward, its thoughts projected with a harsher tone than Elos's. The Devourers will follow. They always do. We should send these 2 away before they lead destruction to our last haven. Murmurs of agreement and dissent rippled through the council. Elos raised a fluid appendage, restoring order. Before judgment is rendered, the resonance must be tested. The Luminous One must commune with the Great Nexus. Vorus stepped forward at this proclamation, bark plates shifting in what appeared to be alarm. Elder Prime, no outsider has communed with the Great Nexus in 7 generations. The risk is necessary, Elos completed firmly. If she is what the resonance suggests, the Great Nexus will confirm it. If not, then the Council's decision becomes simpler. Nyx glanced at Riven, uncertainty evident in her flickering luminescence. The Terran moved closer to her, his presence reassuring despite the tension of the moment. What is this Great Nexus? She asked. Elos's form solidified momentarily into something almost crystalline before resuming its fluid shifting. The heart of this convergence point, the central node of the network that once spanned the galaxy. To commune with it is to connect with the collective knowledge and power of the Ancient Ones. And the risk? Riven inquired, his tone making it clear he was concerned for Nyx's safety. The Great Nexus overwhelms most minds that attempt communion, Elos admitted. Even among the Sylvanics, who have adapted to its energies over millennia, few can withstand more than momentary contact. The metal exoskeleton being projected again. If she is truly of the original Lumen lineage, she will survive. If not, the problem resolves itself. Riven stepped forward, anger evident in his stance. That's not acceptable. You're suggesting risking her life on a theory. The choice is hers, Ello stated, turning to Nyx. Luminous One, will you commune with the Great Nexus? Will you seek the truth of your nature and purpose? Nyx considered her options. Refusal might mean expulsion from the sanctuary, leaving them vulnerable to the pursuing Voidborn. Yet acceptance meant facing a potentially fatal trial based on beliefs about her nature that she had only just encountered. She looked to Riven, finding concern in his eyes but also understanding. He nodded slightly, not encouraging either choice, but supporting her right to make it. I will commune with the Great Nexus, she decided, her luminescence steadying with resolve. Not because I believe I am what you think I am, but because understanding the truth is our best hope against the Devourers. Elos's form pulsed with what might have been approval. The communion will commence at the rising of the twin moons. Prepare yourself, Luminous One. Seek stillness within. As the council session concluded, Vorus led them to a smaller structure where they could rest and recover before the evening's trial. The interior was surprisingly comfortable, with surfaces that adapted to their different physiologies and ambient lighting that adjusted to complement Nyx's natural luminescence. The Great Nexus, Riven said once they were alone. I've heard legends, but never first-hand accounts. Nyx settled onto a conforming surface, her energy levels diminished by the day's events. You know more than you've been saying, Riven. About the convergence points. About my people, perhaps. The Terran sighed, wincing slightly as the movement pulled at his healing wounds. Not about the lumen specifically, no. But yes, I know of the convergence points. He hesitated, then continued. I was part of a Terran research division dedicated to investigating anomalous energy signatures throughout the galaxy. Sites where conventional physics seemed to bend. The division was small, underfunded, largely dismissed by Terran scientific authorities. But we found evidence, ruins, artifacts, records, suggesting an ancient network of locations that once served as barriers against something we couldn't fully comprehend. The Voidborn, Nyx supplied. Riven nodded. Though we didn't know to call them that then, we just knew they were old, powerful, and systematically destroying these special locations. His expression darkened. When they came to my homeworld, I understood why. Nyx's luminescence dimmed with empathy. Your world was a convergence point. A minor one, yes, not like this. He gestured to their surroundings. But significant enough to draw their attention. The official Terran response was inadequate. Diplomatic overtures, attempts at communication, even trade proposals. By the time the true threat was acknowledged, it was too late. He fell silent, the memory clearly painful. Nyx reached out, her four-fingered hand coming to rest gently on his arm, a gesture of comfort that transcended their biological differences. And now? She asked softly. Riven met her gaze. Now I try to save what can be saved, one life at a time if necessary. The moment of connection between them was interrupted by a soft luminescence from outside, the rising of the twin moons that Elos had mentioned. Their light, filtering through the crystalline components of the structure, created patterns across the floor that seemed to move with purpose, converging toward Nyx. Vorus appeared at the entrance. It is time, Luminous One. Nyx rose, her own light steadying with determination. Riven stood as well, clearly intending to accompany her. The Terran may observe, Vorus conceded, but from a safe distance. The energies of the Great Nexus can be harmful to unprepared physiology. They followed the elder Sylvanix through the settlement, now largely deserted as most inhabitants had gathered at a central clearing. At its center stood a crystal formation, similar to the one they had seen upon landing, but vastly larger and more complex. A cathedral of crystalline spires that reached at least 100 meters into the night sky. Within the intricate latticework of crystal, energy pulsed and flowed like luminous liquid, creating patterns too complex for the eye to follow. The twin moons' light struck the formation, refracted and amplified 1,000-fold, bathing the clearing in radiance that seemed alive with consciousness. The gathered refugees, beings of countless forms and origins, formed a wide circle around the Great Nexus, maintaining a respectful distance. The council members stood at the innermost perimeter, Elos at their center, now fully solidified into crystalline form that mirrored the great nexus itself. "Approach Luminous One," the Elder Prime commanded, gesturing to a small platform at the base of the Crystal Cathedral. Nyx turned to Riven one last time. The Terran's expression was tense with concern, but he nodded encouragingly. "I'll be right here," he promised. With that reassurance, Nyx proceeded to the platform. Up close, the great nexus hummed with power that resonated with her own internal energy. The patterns within its crystalline depths seemed to reach out to her, tendrils of light that beckoned and called without sound. Elos addressed the gathered assembly. "Tonight we witness the testing of the resonance. If the Luminous One is truly of the ancient bloodline, the great nexus will recognize her. If not, we shall honor her courage in the attempt." The Elder Prime turned to Nyx. "Place your hands upon the primary facet," they instructed, indicating a smooth hexagonal surface at the nexus's base. "Open your mind and energy to the flow. Do not resist what comes." Nyx approached the indicated facet, which pulsed in rhythm with her own luminescence. She raised her hands, hesitating for just a moment, before placing her palms flat against the crystal surface. The effect was immediate and overwhelming. Energy surged through her body, not painful but intense beyond anything she had experienced. Her consciousness expanded, stretching beyond the confines of her physical form, connecting with something vast and ancient and aware. Visions flooded her mind, not random images, but a coherent stream of knowledge unfolding with impossible speed. She saw her people's true origins, beings of pure energy created by an ancient race to serve as living interfaces with the Convergence Network. She witnessed the slow evolution of the Lumen over countless millennia as they gradually forgot their purpose, their abilities diminishing with each generation. But not all abilities were lost. Some bloodlines retained stronger connections to the original template, dormant potential waiting to be awakened. Hers was one such lineage, perhaps the last that could still fully interface with the Great Nexus. The vision shifted, showing her the Voidborn, the Devourers in their true form, creatures from a dimension parallel to normal space-time, drawn to the energy of sentient life like predators to prey. The Ancient Ones had created the convergence points as barriers, places where the dimensional walls were reinforced rather than weakened, preventing large-scale incursion. For millennia, the system had held, but eventually the Devourers found ways to infiltrate physical space in limited numbers. They began a systematic campaign to locate and destroy the convergence points, corrupting or consuming the knowledge needed to maintain the network. With each point that fell, their influence grew stronger, allowing more of their kind to manifest. Now they sought to complete a specific sequence, a pattern of destruction that would collapse the entire network simultaneously, removing all barriers to their full invasion. And they needed her to do it, needed the specific resonance pattern encoded in her energy signature. But the Great Nexus showed her something else as well. Her resonance pattern could be used not just to destroy the network, but to reactivate it, to strengthen the barriers once more. She was both the key to catastrophe and the hope for salvation. As this knowledge settled into her consciousness, Nyx became aware of a presence within the Great Nexus. Not the Ancient Ones who had long since departed this plane of existence, but a collective consciousness formed from the countless beings who had communed with the crystal over eons. This Gestalt intelligence welcomed her, recognized her, embraced her as one of its own. In that moment of acceptance, power flowed into her. Her luminescence intensified 100-fold, shifting through spectra visible and invisible to most beings. Her physical form began to change subtly, not growing larger, but becoming more complex, with patterns of light forming new structures within and around her core essence. From the perspective of those watching, Nyx appeared to be consumed by light, her form merging with the Great Nexus itself. Riven stepped forward involuntarily, concern overriding caution, but was held back by Vorus's firm grip. "Wait," the Elder counseled. "The communion progresses as it should." For what seemed like hours but might have been minutes, Nyx remained connected to the Great Nexus, her consciousness exploring realms of knowledge and possibility far beyond normal perception. When she finally disengaged, withdrawing her hands from the crystal surface, she was transformed. Her luminescence had stabilized at a higher intensity, with complex patterns flowing across her surface that resembled the writing seen within the Nexus crystals. Her form seemed more defined, more present, as if she had become more fully realized in physical space. She turned to face the assembled refugees, her gaze immediately finding Riven in the crowd. When she spoke, her voice resonated with harmonics that carried meaning beyond the words themselves. "I understand now," she said, the translator rendering her light language with new depth and resonance. "I know what I am, what I was meant to be." Elos approached, their crystalline form vibrating in obvious excitement. "The Great Nexus has accepted you. The resonance is confirmed." Nyx nodded. "Yes, I am of the bloodline you sought, perhaps the last with the full interface capability. But that is not all I learned." She looked around at the gathered refugees, these survivors of worlds consumed by the Devourers. "The Voidborn can be stopped. The network can be reactivated." A murmur ran through the assembly, a sound of hope so long absent that it felt almost foreign. "But," she continued, tempering their reaction, "it will require more than just me. The Great Nexus showed me that a true reactivation requires a convergence of another kind, a union of energies from multiple species, each contributing a unique resonance pattern." She turned to Riven, who had moved closer now that the initial communion was complete. "Including Terran. That's why the Voidborn consume entire planets," Riven realized. "They're not just feeding, they're eliminating potential resistance, species that might contribute to this convergence." "Precisely," Nyx confirmed. "The Ancient Ones designed the network to require cooperation across species lines. No single race, not even the Lumen, could maintain it alone." Elos's form shifted back to its fluid state, rippling with what appeared to be intense thought. "This is revolutionary knowledge, luminous one. If true, it changes our understanding of both the past and our possible future." "It is true," Nyx stated with quiet certainty. "The Great Nexus does not lie, though its knowledge can be difficult to interpret. I saw the path forward with absolute clarity." "What must be done?" Vorus asked, the Elder's bark plates shifting with anticipation. Before Nyx could answer, a low vibration ran through the ground beneath them. The crystalline structures throughout the settlement resonated in response, their harmonics shifting to a more discordant pattern. Elos solidified instantly into a defensive configuration. "Sentinels report orbital disturbance. Something has breached the outer atmospheric barrier." The assembled refugees grew restless, many moving toward predetermined evacuation positions. They had all experienced this before, the prelude to a Devourer attack. "They've found us already," Riven said grimly, retrieving his pulse rifle despite its depleted charge. Nyx shook her head. "Not them. Not yet." Her newly enhanced senses detected something different in the disturbance pattern, a signature that was neither sanctuary nor voidborn. "Something else is coming," she announced. "Something familiar." The sky above the clearing shimmered, the twin moon's light bending around a distortion that grew more pronounced by the second. Then, with a flash of displaced energy, a vessel materialized in the air above them, sleek, organic in design, pulsing with the same luminescent patterns that now adorned Nyx's form. "A lumen vessel," she whispered in disbelief. "But how? My people have no ships that can traverse dimensional barriers." The vessel descended slowly, coming to rest at the edge of the clearing. Its hull, which appeared to be composed of solidified light, rippled and parted, forming an entranceway from which emerged a figure that caused Nyx's luminescence to flare with shock. The newcomer was lumen like herself, but taller, more radiant, with patterns of light that suggested great age and power. She recognized the configuration instantly, though she had never seen this particular individual before. "An elder," she said, stepping forward, "but not from my enclave." The lumen elder approached, their light pulsing in a formal greeting pattern that was at once ancient and familiar to Nyx. When they spoke, the translator rendered a voice of surprising depth and resonance. "I am Zira, last elder of the Mara Enclave. I felt your communion with the Great Nexus across the dimensional veil, a beacon I had almost lost hope of ever detecting." Nyx returned the formal greeting, adding the newly acquired patterns that the Great Nexus had taught her. "I am Nyx of the Solari Enclave, Though I now understand that our divisions into enclaves was never part of the original design. Zira's light pulsed with what might have been sad acknowledgement. Indeed, separation was a defensive strategy adopted after the fall of the primary convergence point, millennia ago. It preserved our species but accelerated our disconnect from our true purpose. The elder turned to address Elos and the council. I apologize for this abrupt arrival, caretakers of the sanctuary. I come not as intruder, but as ally, perhaps the last free representative of a race created to maintain what you protect. Elos flowed forward, their forms shifting to a more diplomatic configuration. Your arrival is unexpected but fortuitous, Elder Zira. The Luminous One has just completed communion with the Great Nexus and speaks of reactivating the network. Then I am not too late, Zira said, their light pulsing with renewed intensity. The Mara Enclave has preserved certain knowledge through the ages, techniques, protocols, activation sequences, but we lacked a fully compatible interface. The elder's attention returned to Nyx. Until now. Riven stepped forward, his expression guarded despite the seemingly positive development. This is convenient timing. How did you locate this sanctuary so precisely? How do we know you haven't led the Voidborn straight to us? Zira regarded the Terran with a pulse pattern that suggested respectful assessment rather than offense. A valid concern, Defender. I followed no physical trail but the resonance pattern of a successful communion, a signal detectable only to those specifically attuned to it. The Elder's light shifted to a more urgent pattern. But you are correct that time is limited. The Devourers cannot detect the communion directly, but they monitor for the aftermath, the energy signature of an awakened interface. The Sovereign said others would come, Nyx remembered, that the pattern would persist. Yes, Zira confirmed grimly. They have been systematically eliminating potential interfaces for centuries. You, Nyx of Solari, may be the last with the full capability. Your communion with the Great Nexus will have alerted them that someone with your abilities exists. They will commit significant resources to finding you now. Elos rippled with concern. The sanctuary's concealment barriers are strong, but not impenetrable to determined search. We must prepare for potential discovery. Or, Nyx suggested, her new knowledge guiding her thoughts, we could take action first. The Great Nexus showed me that this convergence point is not just a refuge, it's a nexus, a node in the network. From here, with the right resonance patterns, we could reach other surviving points, begin the reactivation sequence. Zira's luminescence flared with excitement. The primary protocol, yes, it could work, but it would require a convergence choir, representatives of at least 7 distinct sentient species, each contributing their unique resonance. That we can provide, Voris stated. The sanctuary holds representatives of 17 species, all united in opposition to the Devourers. And it would require a physical journey to at least 3 other convergence points, Zira added. The network cannot be fully reactivated from a single node, no matter how powerful. Riven, who had been listening intently, spoke up. How would we even locate these other points? If they're hidden like this sanctuary? The Great Nexus knows, Nyx said with certainty. It showed me their locations, encoded in resonance patterns. She turned to Zira. And your vessel, it can traverse the dimensional barriers that hide these places? The Elder's light pulsed affirmatively. The Mara have preserved this technology, though our understanding of its principles has diminished with time. Our vessel can follow the resonance paths between convergence points, if properly guided by an interface such as yourself. Elos flowed into the center of the discussion, their form pulsing with the authority of their position. This council must deliberate on this development. The risk of action must be weighed against the risk of discovery. With respect, Elder Prime, Nyx countered, her newfound confidence evident in her resonance. The Great Nexus was clear. This opportunity may not come again. The convergence points are falling one by one. If we wait, there may not be enough left to reactivate the network. The council members communicated among themselves in their silent, mind-to-mind manner. Finally, Elos spoke for them all. The council recognizes the wisdom in the Luminous One's words. We will authorize the formation of a convergence choir and support this mission. The Elder Prime turned to address the gathered refugees. Volunteers from the 7 required lineages will be sought. This undertaking carries great risk, but greater potential reward. The first real hope of resistance against the devourers in generations. As the assembly dispersed to begin preparations, Riven approached Nix, his expression a mixture of concern and determination. "I'm coming with you," he stated, not a request but a declaration. Nix's luminescence pulsed with warmth. "I was counting on it. The Great Nexus showed me that Terran resonance is one of the 7 required patterns, and beyond that." She hesitated, then continued with simple honesty. "I would not wish to face this without you beside me." Riven's scarred face softened into something approaching a smile. "Partners against the void, then." "Partners," she agreed, her light synchronizing briefly with his bioelectrical field in a moment of connection that transcended their physical differences. Zira observed this interaction with interest, their own light patterns suggesting approval. The Ancient Ones designed the network to require cooperation across species divisions. They understood that unity and diversity was the greatest defense against the homogenizing hunger of the void.